Hello my dear viewers and welcome to another week. 3 weeks ago I did a video about Inwood Hill Park in Upper Manhattan, and I mentioned that there was a military outpost there, Fort Coghill, which was part of the main Fort Washington and Fort Tryon fortifications during the American Revolution. So I figured I'll go back to the area and finish the walk by visiting the former sites of Fort Tryon and Fort Washington. So, since once again I'm walking from the side of Broadway Street, let me cross to the other side using this subway station, which looks like an underground bunker. But once we go on the other side, we come out next to the Fort Tryon Park and the Margaret Corbin Circle. Now, Margaret Corbin is such a fascinating person. When the American Revolution began, she left home to go along with her husband to fight in the revolution. Many women followed their husbands as they cooked and did laundry in the camps, as well as took care of the sick and the wounded soldiers. Fighting in this area at the Battle of Fort Washington, her husband was killed and she took over firing his cannon, eventually getting hit and badly injured herself on the left side of her body. She was the first woman to receive a military pension. She is buried in West Point, so when I do a video in that location, I can dive deeper into her life if anybody would be interested. Once you enter the park and walk a little to the left, you can walk through Heather Garden, a beautiful garden with various plants, shrubs, butterflies. Honestly, a gorgeous walk, although sorry for a little bit of a darker footage, as it was just past 7 o'clock in the morning, so the sun was just beginning to make its way into all the corners of the park. Many of my videos I film very early in the morning, like usually I leave my house before 6 a.m., not just to avoid traffic like I many times joke about, but also to avoid people. Honestly, I try to respect privacy as much as I can, and therefore not show faces in my videos on YouTube. Now, sometimes that will simply be unavoidable depending on the location I'm filming, but in general, I make every effort to avoid it. Walking further, you come across the Linden Terrace and the former site of Fort Tryon. It used to be called Mount Washington, however, once the British took over the area, they renamed it Fort Tryon in honor of the last British governor of colonial New York City, and afterwards the name simply stuck. This flagpole is the site of the fort itself, and looking out, you can right away tell why this was such a strategic location for defense. You can see Manhattan all the way to the Harlem River, and then Bronx beyond it. On the other side, the Hudson River could have been also guarded very closely. Of course, today the area is much more covered by trees and vegetation, hence it is a little bit harder to imagine the true importance of this location. However, I am sure that at the time of this fort being active, it would be more exposed as not to obstruct the view and the cannon fire. But check out the great heights right here, and hence the impressive build. And not only can you enjoy the beautiful Hudson River, but also get a good glimpse of the George Washington Bridge, which I will show you a little bit more in a few minutes. The park itself goes back to John D. Rockefeller, who was probably the wealthiest American in history and one of the wealthiest people ever alive, making his wealth in the oil industry. He bought this land in the early 1900s and hired Frederick Olmsted Jr., who was the son of Frederick Olmsted, the co-designer of such parks as Central Park in Manhattan and Prospect Park in Brooklyn. Once the park was completed in 1935, Rockefeller gifted it to the city of New York just 2 years before he passed away. Shortly afterwards, in 1938, a new addition opened to the public, the Met Cloysters, as you see here. John D. Rockefeller Jr., the son of John Rockefeller, bought the land and an art collection, as well as donated many additional art pieces to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, this being one of their branches, dedicated to the history of medieval European art and architecture. The buildings you see are a replica of an actual medieval monastery, giving the whole area a really fitting atmosphere. And believe me when I say the inside is so beautiful and peaceful with all the gardens. And I have been inside a few times, I think maybe 2 or 3 that I could remember from the top of my head, but that would be a story and a video for another time. For now, I just want to show you around the park in general and point out some attractions. By the Cloysters, I love this part of a barricaded path and stairs which have been reclaimed by nature. Probably nothing special about it. I mean, a path which was close to the public for, whatever reason. Maybe nearby roads were built so that this made no more sense, and nothing really special about it. But still, just the way it looks, you always have that Indiana Jones thoughts in the back of your mind. Maybe a buried treasure or something like that. On our way back, I want to walk along the Hudson River because there is one more special and really cool place I want to show you. A former estate of Cornelius C.K.G. Billings. Billings built a magnificent estate here in 1907, which was bought by John D. Rockefeller to be incorporated into the park. However, in 1926, it burned down. However, some of its features still remain, like these arches and the driveway which used to lead into the estate itself. As you see here, it was a private road connecting Riverside Drive to the mansion, and today stands as a reminder of the glamorous past. And glamorous past indeed, as Billings loved horses and was a horse race enthusiast. Hence, in 1903, he organized a dinner where his guests, and get this, sat on top of their horses while enjoying the finest dinner while having all their requests attended by servers. I know it might sound cool as an experience, but I don't know, I'm a simple guy. I would probably prefer just to grab some pizza slices and call it a night instead of trying to balance my meal on top of a horse. And as you see here, everything was laid out in bricks, so it had to look gorgeous when it was new. There is also a gatehouse of the former mansion, which you get to see when you enter the park itself on the left side. Here is how it looks like from the street, so maybe many will just walk past it, not giving it a second thought. But from the inside of the park, you see the back of it, and it's pretty cool with this stone foundation and the stucco top. Okay, but let me show you the highest point in Manhattan and the former site of Fort Washington, what today is Bennett Park. It's named Bennett Park after James Gordon Bennett, who was the founder of the New York Herald, which was an extremely popular newspaper in New York City from 1835 until 1924, and whose work had a very big impact on American journalism and how newspapers reported on the news later on. As you see, the park itself is going through renovations, which I did not know myself. There you can see some cannons, which are in the middle of the work zone. But the main marker of Fort Washington is on the outer walls of the park itself, and you can see it from the street. Standing on the side, you can also see how the sidewalks go down from all sides, making this the highest point, and hence a very strategic location for a fort. So since I walked all the way to Bennett Park, I was going through the streets and really enjoying the buildings and the architecture. As you see here, it's really nice, and some of the buildings are really gorgeous, to be honest with you, if you look very closely, especially on the top floors. But going through all of this, I kind of ended up by the George Washington Bridge, and I thought to myself, hey, why not walk on it a little and give you a little bit of a vantage point from the bridge itself? And so I did. I walked to about the halfway point of the bridge itself and then back. And honestly, I never walked across this bridge. This was my first time. I drove on it more times than I probably should have, but never on foot. And it's just an amazing experience. But if anyone is afraid of heights, I warn you, at first it's a very, very uncomfortable experience, and much different than walking across like Brooklyn Bridge or Williamsburg Bridge, not just because of the height of the bridge itself, but also the fact that you are so close to the edge and the bars are not that close to one another. In fact, the whole time I was shaking not to drop my phone accidentally into the water, because the possibility of that was pretty high, as the cars and the trucks passing by created vibrations and shaking, which gave me that additional layer of being worried of dropping my phone. Again, nothing in terms of thinking the bridge would collapse, because this thing is built like a tank. But still, those buildings on the side that you see are 5 stories high, and you do not even get really fully on the bridge at this point, and you are already above their roofs. So you really feel and see the height. But walking towards the New Jersey side, I had this very weird feeling the whole time, like I'm falling a little bit to the right side of the path. And oh, by the way, you need to stand as close to the edges of the path as you can, because generally most people that use this bridge are on bicycles, and they are speeding. Try to stay to the left or to the right as much as you can. But then I looked closer, like here, and it does seem like the path leans a little bit down from the roadway and the center of the bridge. I do not know if that is true or just sort of like an illusion, but certainly it feels like it, so I was very uncomfortable. Walking back and keeping now to the other side, I was more relaxed and I did not have that feeling no more, that I was leaning into the water. But I would highly recommend it, as the views are just spectacular. Work began on the bridge in 1927 and it opened in 1931. But guess what? It was completed ahead of schedule and below budget. When do you hear of such a phenomenon on public projects today? You just don't. When it opened, it was the longest suspension bridge in the world, losing that title in 1937 to the Golden State Bridge in San Francisco, California. It was designed by Otmar Ammann, and when it opened, it only had one deck, the upper one where we are. The lower deck was added in 1962, making the bridge a 14-lane car bridge. It's really a highway basically. Just a minute ago, I said that the bridge was built like a tank because it is designed in such a way that a third deck can be added in the future. That's right, 3 decks. So possibly like 21 lanes of traffic. Now that's crazy. So I hope you enjoyed this video and I was able to show you some things that you either didn't see or maybe you didn't know about. So now that if you do travel here, you'll be a little bit more on the lookout for them. But like always, make sure you subscribe if you haven't done so yet, because I have a lot more locations planned out for this summer. And I will see you next week in another location here in New York. Take care, everyone.